Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. I wiped the tears from my eyes as we turned to leave the funeral service. Few people attended the service. My wife, Marlene, my daughter, an old friend, and 2 officials. My son refused to attend. Marlene took my hand, pulled me to her and said softly, "I know it's hard when it's someone you love," and kissed me on the cheek. I corrected her. "Darling, the correct word is beloved in the past tense. Now I'm just sorry about what happened and how she suffered so much last year. You are the one I love. Thank you for your help and support, and especially for your extra love in recent months." The last chapter, which relates to an earlier period of my life, has just been written and closed. The first chapter of this life was written 17 years ago when I married her, Cindy. The final chapters began 11 years ago, when we went to the Capitol to meet the 1st Marine Corps Air Wing. I retired 10 years ago, and one of my close friends, Jerry, did a great job to organize a meeting of our fellow Marines. Most of us completed flight training and then served together for the first 4 or 5 years of our military careers. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you a little more about Cindy and me. My name is Ronald Ron Alren. Cindy and I met at a Marine Corps day party when I was stationed in Washington. We dated and got married 6 months later. We have adopted a modified version of an open marriage. I did this thinking that it would be some relief for her if she could make love during periods when I was on board for 6 months or more. We agreed that we would be honest with each other and let each other know what was going on. We will inform the other person in advance of any extramarital affairs whenever possible, and we will not enter into any relationship with any persons with whom we are in any way related. Naturally, we would only participate if proper safety procedures were followed, which meant that condoms would be used most of the time. It turns out that the reason for an open marriage was short-lived. 2 years after we got married, I suffered an eye injury in a car accident. The injury couldn't be fixed according to Navy flight standards, and I started flying at the table. Before the accident, I was on a business trip only once for 8 months, and Cindy used her freedom twice, and I only once. I could only hold a non-flying administrative position for about 2 years. I was never sent on a business trip again. So, after working at the desk for a little over 2 years, I quit out of frustration that I couldn't fly on anything but the desktop. We were just approaching our 5th anniversary when I resigned. Our daughter was born immediately after the accident, and our son was born 2 years later. I got a good job at an airport planning and construction firm located in St. Louis. In addition to my administrative duties, I was able to get qualified to fly the company's aircraft. I flew about twice a month and was away for no more than 1 or 2 nights. It didn't look like a fighter jet, but it was flying, and I was happy. After my return from my last tour in the Marines, neither of us took advantage of our open marriage contract. We didn't need it, as we were together with several short overnight separations. When Jerry, the organizer, informed me about the meeting, I felt tickled. I told Cindy about it, and she was almost as excited as I was. When I asked my boss for a couple of days off, he was happy to give it to me and planned a trip to Washington this Friday on business. I could take Cindy and him on the company plane, and he would take the weekend off to see his friends before we flew back on Monday. My expenses, in fact, will consist of accommodation, meals, and transportation during my stay in Washington. Cindy and I arrived at the hotel around noon on Friday. The meeting took place only on Saturday, starting with lunch and ending with a banquet and dancing on Saturday evening. Small groups like ours usually held meetings and/or events on Sundays. I managed to find Jerry and a couple of other guys and their wives, and we had dinner with them. Cindy knew Jerry and his wife, and she knew Carl, but she had never met his wife. The 6 of us had a wonderful evening, and Jerry was able to get us tickets to a concert at the Kennedy Center. On Saturday, Cindy and I slept well, had a late breakfast, and then joined the others for the first lunch. After that, the men gathered in groups of different sizes, and memories of the past began. There were a lot of vendors displaying all kinds of military-related materials, and I, along with 5 of my closest friends, walked around them, exchanging stories or remembering them. Cindy, along with 4 or 5 other wives, apologized and headed to the Smithsonian Institution. They returned around 5, and we all went to our rooms to rest, change clothes, and return to the banquet at 7. Our guest was a retired colonel who served under Honor Puller. He kept us glued to our seats, talking about Honor's career. A lot of it was serious, but it was thoroughly seasoned with funny anecdotes, especially in the way he told them. The formal proceedings ended around 9, and the group took over the reins of government. I was more interested in talking to my old friends, and Cindy really wanted to dance. Eventually, she told me that she would find one or more dance partners and I could talk myself out of it. It suited me, and to be honest, I almost forgot about her. About an hour later, I experienced the shock of my life when Cindy appeared from the dance floor. She leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Honey, I'm going to be away for a while." It took a moment for what she said to sink in. Then I asked incredulously, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" She took my arm and pulled me away from the group. "I found someone interesting. I won't be away for too long." Now the full impact of what she was saying has collapsed. She wanted to take advantage of our open marriage. When I left the service, I believed that this part of our life and experience was over. I just stood there and stared at her with my mouth open. She reached out, patted my cheek affectionately, and repeated in a carefree voice that she would not be away for too long. Before I could react or say anything, she disappeared into the crowd on the dance floor. I tried to catch her, but she disappeared. My mind was racing as I thought about what was going on. We haven't talked about our arrangement for many years. I just chalked it up to a past story. But now Cindy was apparently cashing in on it. I had to admit to myself that since we had never officially reneged on an agreement, she was completely right. But when we signed our agreement, I didn't think for a minute that it would be put into effect while we were together, or only for a short time. My thoughts were interrupted when one of the guys called me and asked if I would come back. I joined them and tried to join the celebration again, but my mind was not there. After a while, 2 of my close friends, who determined that something was wrong, began to find out. It didn't seem to take long before I confessed what was going on. This broke the conversation and there was silence for a few minutes. One of the guys, trying to defuse the situation and get back to the conversation, said, "Well, at least it's not with good old Larry Martin." Some chuckled and agreed. It didn't seem very funny to me. Larry was a member of our squadron in flight school, and for about 2 years after that, I hated him to the core. He was a very handsome blonde pilot and he knew it. In the first year after graduating from flight school, he was diagnosed and began to be treated for venereal disease. Less than a year later, he was diagnosed and began to be treated again. This time, he was offered to resign or face trial on charges of conduct unbecoming an officer and be fired. He resigned. My stomach turned sour a few minutes later when Jerry took me aside and said that Larry was actually present at the meeting, and my stomach clenched into a complete spasm when he continued by saying that he had seen Cindy dancing with him before. He quickly apologized, saying he thought I had seen them. Jesus, Jerry, do you really think I'd just be sitting there if I knew that son of a bitch was here dancing with Cindy? Do you know which room he's in? Chill out, Ron. Let's not fly off the rails. No, I do not know which room he is in, and at the reception you will be connected to his room, but they will not give you his room number. Let's ask around if anyone knows. It took about 10 minutes, but I noticed Marv, who was one of Larry's few friends. He knew and gave me his room number. It's been about 30 minutes since Cindy left. I gave Jerry a sign that I was leaving. He naturally assumed that I had Larry's room number. By the time I got to the lobby, 6 of my buddies had approached me. They came to make sure I didn't get into trouble. While I was waiting for the elevator, I was told not to lose my cool, think about it, do nothing rash, etc. The elevator door opened and I was about to rush inside when I stopped, stunned. Cindy was there, ready to go out into the lobby. Her lipstick was fresh and her hair was neatly combed. I grabbed her when she came out and my escorts dispersed, standing a few steps away from the elevator. "Where the hell have you been?" She was somewhat stunned but was able to respond, showing only slight irritation. "Darling, I told you so. I met an interesting person. I was with him. I do not know why you are so excited. I haven't done anything that we haven't agreed on." This interesting man wasn't Larry Martin in room 1021, was he? Her color has faded. I didn't need an answer. "That son of a bitch. I'm going to kill that bastard." Cindy was clearly shocked and people were looking at us. I took her by the hand and led her into the elevator, which had just opened. She tried to protest, but I told her angrily to keep her damn mouth shut. On our floor, I practically dragged her into our room, went in, slammed the door, and almost threw her on the bed. By the time I was ready to talk to her, she was crying and hysterical. "Ron, what happened to you?" "What did I do? What happened?" I was shaking, but I stopped when I realized I was taking out my frustration and anger on her. The disappointment was that our signals were wrong, but the anger I felt about Larry was something else. I sat down and covered my head with my hands. Honey, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to take it out on you. Can we be quiet for a few minutes and let me get my head back, right? I need to clean up the mess. She sniffed loudly and said, yes, we can rest for a minute. I'm so sorry that I upset you so much. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Cindy went to the bathroom to wash her face and get some face wipes. When she returned, she sat on my lap and asked if we could talk now. I nodded. Ron, can you tell me what it is? I thought we had a mutual understanding soon after we got married. You've never reacted like this before. Please tell me what I did wrong. Dear, I apologize for my behavior. The first problem is what I do or don't do myself. I came to the conclusion that our arrangement was to help us get through the times when I was on a business trip for several months. Since I left the army, I just assumed that we no longer needed this agreement. I'm sorry, it was a mistake on my part, because I didn't talk about it and didn't stop there a long time ago. Oh, darling, I'm sorry too. I should have talked about it. But to be honest, tonight was the first time I had a desire to be with someone else for a while. I understand our misunderstanding, and we can certainly terminate this agreement right now. Okay, let's resolve this issue later. And now I want to know, did you know that I served with him at the beginning of my military career before I met you? Her color disappeared, and I realized that I had touched a nerve. Oh, honey, I'm sorry, please. He is such a nice person, and it is very pleasant to communicate with him. He had a pretty hard life, and I admire him for being able to do what he did. I think... Damn it, Cindy, answer my question. Do you know that we know each other? A long pause and a tremor. Yes, I knew, but I was afraid. I don't give a shit about what you were afraid of. Our agreement was that we would not participate in events with any of us we knew. Now, I think you understand why I insisted that we make this part of our agreement. To be honest, at the moment, I don't see that this condition is really necessary. Larry is a wonderful person, and I enjoyed his company. It was too much. I stood up, practically knocking her to the floor. You don't understand, do you? That bastard, if I had thought about it then, would have been exactly the reason why I insisted that I have no friends or acquaintances. Sit down and let me tell you about this poor son of a bitch. Then I told her about how he was fired from the Corps. I added the detail that during his second round of venereal disease, it was discovered that the general's daughter, whom he was dating, was also infected. I honestly told her that it was unclear who had infected whom with the disease. Then I popped out with something I regretted. Trying to be a little lighthearted, I said, I think you should be grateful to him. His activities put an end to this affair, and because of that, I was still free when you showed up. It wouldn't have been so bad, but then I popped out. And now his bill for making love to the women I've dated is 100%. Cindy sat motionless for a minute. Her wheels were spinning. Then she smiled and said softly, Why, Rob, I'm surprised and ashamed of you. It all blew up because you're jealous of him. I exploded. Damn it, woman, you have to admire a man to be jealous of him. There is nothing to admire about him. I do not know what kind of shit he fed you to get your sympathy, but I can guarantee that most, if not all, of what he said was just pure shit. Shit designed to get you into his bag. She cringed a little, and then, straightening up, suggested that we sleep for now and talk about it when we get home. With these words, she invited us to go down the stairs and join the group, that everything would be gone soon. She got up, reached for her purse, and went to the bathroom. She appeared a few minutes later, her makeup refreshed and ready to go. Put on your coat and let's go. We need a distraction. I apologize for being responsible for part of what happened. I'm not going back there. As far as I understand, this hype is over. Well, dear, I'd like to go back and say goodbye to some of our old friends. Let me explain it this way. You're not coming back without me. If I go and run into Larry, one of us will spend the night in the hospital or morgue. So I'm not telling you that you can't go. I'm just explaining what might happen if we go. The choice is yours. Oh, Ron, get off your tall horse. The end of the world has not come. We can enjoy the last few hours with our friends. I looked at her face and told her I wasn't joking. She could tell by my look and voice that I wasn't joking. She looked at me for a while and then smiled. All right. She tried to add some humor by flippantly saying, Well, it seems a little funny now, but we could get naked and play a little. That's when I really shook her. Honey, I love you, and I'm sorry for everything that happened, but we're not going to make love again until you get checked out by a doctor. She was incredulous and just stood and stared at me while it all sank into her. You're joking, of course. I made him put on a condom. Everything is fine and I don't need to be examined. The latter came out with a small amount of poison. Oh, is that so? Damn you. I'll take that as a yes. She started crying and rushed into the bathroom, locking the door. It was dirty and insidious, but the anger and pain were still pretty much under control. And to tell the truth, I wanted to hurt someone. I was sorry that Cindy had to take on all the heat. I called my boss and told him that our plans had changed and that we would be ready to return home tomorrow morning if he wished. He said it was great and that we should meet at the plane at 9. Then I called Jerry on his cell phone and told him we were leaving in the morning. He was sorry, and he asked if everything was okay between Cindy and me. I told him what had happened, and he asked if Cindy and I could go downstairs for a last drink, and if we could also have breakfast with them in the morning. I gave up, and Cindy and I went back to the meeting. When we reunited with Jerry and his wife, I noticed that most of the wives were there, but a few guys had left. When I asked where they were, Jerry just said, "It looks like they all had full bladders at the same time. They'll be right back." Of course, they all appeared within a few minutes. However, I noticed that they were all smiling broadly, and one of them gave Jerry a thumbs up. We drank, said goodbye, and returned to the room. We weren't in our room when my phone rang. Jerry informed me that Larry apparently fell down the stairs and was taken to the hospital. According to preliminary data, he will stay there for a day or two. I couldn't help but smile and thank him for the good news. I hung up the phone, and then it hit me. I remembered hearing sirens in or near the hotel shortly after the guys returned. Now I understood the smiles and the high sign. I wanted to laugh. Cindy wanted to know what it was and what made me so happy. I told her, and she immediately gasped and said that we should go to him before leaving in the morning. I've had enough. Cindy, you've known me for almost 15 years. You've known me for almost 5 years of my life as a Marine, and you know that Marines take care of each other. She intervened. But Larry is a Marine. There is a small caveat here. There is an unwritten rule. The wife of a colleague is inviolable, but shit happens as well as the big consequences of this. Loudly, not by our definition. But if you want to assume that he's a Marine, let me explain something in a language you understand. If you want a happy life, you don't mess with the Marines, especially if you're a Marine. With tears in her eyes, she turned to the bathroom and said, "Ron, I'm terribly ashamed and disappointed in you. This bastard can take care of himself. He definitely doesn't need your help. And I don't feel sorry for him. If I have to go to him, I'll break something that hasn't been broken yet. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy." Asterisk, 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 asterisk. When we returned home, we were a little apart for a few days. Most of the distance was created by the fact that I insisted that she be checked before we made love again. On Tuesday, she was examined and given a health certificate. The fact that I insisted, and that the results were negative, caused Cindy to, "I told you so." It was her way of saying that I wasn't forgiven yet. It wasn't until Thursday evening that we started discussing our open prenuptial agreement. I was surprised and very disappointed when Cindy firmly stated that we should keep the agreement intact. I gave up after we added a clarification and a new item. Explanation. Before using the freedom provided by the agreement, we will warn each other in advance, even if it means only a few minutes. Added. When receiving information, the partner can veto it. There will be no discussion, and the veto will negate any other provisions of the agreement. When we were about to get back to normal, I pulled out another problem and postponed our reunion for another couple of weeks. Cindy didn't want to just leave everything like that. She was constantly coming up with something to challenge my idea of Larry or justify her thoughts about him. It wasn't a regular or permanent occurrence, but it appeared several times during the first 2 weeks at home. I'm tired of Larry, and I'm tired of him popping up in discussions. One evening, when the children went to bed, she picked him up again. It's been a hard day, and I'm tired. When Larry was introduced again, I replied that he was just a gigolo who would go to bed with anything. Cindy immediately tried to protect him, and I told her so. "Cindy, please forget about this asshole. We don't need him in our conversations anymore." "Ron, I do not know why you are so stubborn. He deserves more respect than you all want to give him." Then I put my foot in my mouth. "Cindy, the only reason you want to protect him is because you can't believe that a man who is suspended like a horse and pleasuring a woman doesn't have a number of wonderful characteristics." She screamed at me, "Ron, I never knew you could be so cruel and nasty in your conversations." She ran out of the room and we didn't speak for several days. However, the last exchange seems to have done its job. I haven't heard from Larry anymore. Everything got better and everything was fine for about 3 months. Then something started happening. Of course, some things didn't seem to matter at the time. It was about 3 months after the reunion, when our friends from when we lived in Washington were passing through the city. They called shortly after I got to work and asked if Cindy and I could meet them for dinner tonight. I wondered why they called me at work instead of calling Cindy at home. I finished what I was doing and then called Cindy to let her know. Cindy didn't answer. I waited and called about an hour later, but there was still no response. It seemed strange to me because we always informed each other about our location. If she had run to the grocery store, she would probably have been home by now. I went home for lunch, as it often happens. She was at home, and when I asked her where she had been this morning, she apologized and said she had to run to the department store for something. I don't remember what exactly now. However, I noticed a slight blush on her face when she answered, and I realized that something was wrong. Our friends left a message on her answering machine, and she either didn't find the time or didn't have time to listen to it. I had a strange feeling that she had returned home a little earlier than me. There was nothing remarkable for another 5 or 6 weeks. One night I returned from work and, entering the house from the garage, took the receipt from the floor. Judging by its location, it must have been something that Cindy dropped. I took a quick look at him and headed for the door again. It didn't immediately occur to me, but suddenly I took another look. It was a parking receipt from the Sheraton Hotel. I studied it a little more and determined that it was released today at 11:15 a.m. The amount of the fee was for more than 2 hours. She didn't say she was going out today, and I remembered that she asked if she was going to meet me for lunch. I told her I was having lunch with a client. Now my mind was working at its limit. The Sheraton is no more than 20 minutes away, so she'd be home by lunch if I had a change of plans. Something was strange. When I entered, she was finishing cooking dinner and gave me a joyful smile and a big kiss. I didn't say anything about the check while we were eating. However, during the conversation, I asked the children how their day had been and got the usual long description of their activities. Then I asked Cindy how her day was. She said everything was fine. When I asked her what she was doing, she looked down and I noticed that she didn't want to talk much. She described several activities, the usual routine, but never once mentioned leaving the house. Shortly after the children went to bed, she announced that she was very tired and was going to bed. I was tempted to go with her, but I didn't. She was holding back something. I began to have suspicions about what it might be, but I was afraid that I might say something that I shouldn't have said or something completely wrong, and decided to watch some TV. I was very concerned, but the parking receipt wasn't a big story. The problem disappeared within the next week or two, and I left it behind. This went on until one night I checked the accounts. I've always managed our finances. I keep Cindy up to date, and she works with me from time to time. I don't want her to know anything about our finances in case something happens to me. I usually look at bills, but I don't look at them in detail unless the amount is different from the usual one. Her mobile phone statement usually contains a number of local calls, and sometimes 1 or 2 long-distance calls to the 800 number. In rare cases, there will be an incoming long-distance call. This time when I scanned, my vision stopped at 3 incoming and 2 outgoing calls to the area code 414. All of them were calls late at night. All were to the same number and from the same number. All were made within about a week just before the application was closed. A week ago. A strange call. I grabbed the phone book and looked up the area code 414. When I found it, my blood ran cold. Milwaukee, Larry's city. What the hell is going on? Cindy was out of earshot, so I picked up the phone and dialed the number. Before it could ring, I hung up. If it was Larry's phone and if he had a caller ID, he would know where the call came from. I went into the bedroom and got my cell phone. I have blocked the caller ID on it. I dialed the number again. The male voice that answered was Larry's. I disguised my voice and introduced myself as a caller from the Police Charity Association. I talked just enough to be absolutely sure it was Larry. I had to suppress the urge to rush into the living room and face Cindy, but I didn't, and after a few minutes of sitting, feeling sick in my stomach, I was able to pull myself together and start thinking rationally about what I need to do. The first thing I did was pull out the statements for the months since the reunion. Larry's outgoing and then incoming call happened about a month after the reunion. I'm sure Cindy answered the call because there were only 2 calls, and they were separated by 5 other calls. According to the following statement, there was only 1 call. But there were 3 challenges in the next statement. The first one was obviously related to 1 call in the last statement. and then to 2 calls near the end of the statement period. Everything is very interesting. But what did they mean, and what was I going to do with them? When I came to the likely answer to the first question, my stomach hurt. Her unexplained absences, the calls, her defense of him. Did they have an affair? But when, where, and how was it done? Larry didn't have any business in town that I knew about. Otherwise, I would have known he was around. When I thought about it, I got inspired. Alan, one of my golf buddies, was an assistant manager at the Sheraton. Maybe he can help me. The next day, I called him and went to the hotel to meet him during my lunch break. I explained what I suspected and then asked if he could tell me if Larry had been a guest in the last 6 months, and if so, when. He said he could find out. It will take about a day before he has time to access the records. It was towards the end of the next day, Friday, and he passed on the information I asked for. I prayed that Larry wouldn't be found visiting. My prayers went unanswered. Larry has come here 3 times for one night in the last few months. He gave me the dates and then concluded, "Ron, I also have to tell you that he has a reservation for next Tuesday night." I went cold when all sorts of things started going through my head. And then I asked, "Alan, is it possible to see him put in a room where I could install a camera?" He hesitated for a minute and then said, "Hey, buddy, that would be illegal. I can't do this." Pause. "But I have no idea how you came up with this idea. But if you had booked a specific room the day before and the day after he was here, and somehow he was assigned to this room, and for some reason you forgot to bring the cameras that you had with you," I immediately caught his lead. "Thank you, Alan. How would you like me to make a reservation so there won't be any problems?" He told me to just call the hotel and book a room. He would take care of the room allocation. Later, when I checked the dates with the calls and with the fact that Larry was here, I found that the first calls occurred about a month after the reunion and about 10 days before Larry arrived. The second set was about a week before our friend's visit, and Larry showed up the same day. The third one, of course, was only a week ago, and Larry was supposed to come in a few days. At home, after my discoveries, I found that it was impossible to behave normally. I wasn't normal. My stomach hurt like never before. I couldn't and didn't eat much, and of course Cindy caught it. She waited until the children were gone, and then she came over and tried to sit on my lap. I wouldn't let her. "Darling, what happened? I can tell that something is bothering you very much. Could you talk to me about it? Maybe I can help." I didn't want to talk to her, but I knew she would haunt me, so I decided to bait the hook. "Nothing. It's just a piece of the past that I don't like to remember." "Like what?" "Don't worry about it, I'll be fine." "Ron, don't do this. Let's put it on the table and take care of it, whatever it is." Pause. "Good." Pause. "Well, Jerry called today. He tried to act as if it was an ordinary social challenge, but," pause and deep breath, as the conversation continued, he started to get serious, and finally told me that he was worried about what happened in Washington, and he, almost in a whisper, just wanted to see if everything was okay between us. She turned white as a sheet. "It just reminded me of that bastard Larry, and those memories are not very pleasant and still very frustrating." She started to say something, stopped, and then with tears in her eyes said, "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry. When it happened, I had no idea it would hurt you. You know that I love you, and the last thing I want to do is hurt you." With these words, she burst into a real shower of tears and, excusing herself, went to the bathroom. I didn't know if her actions indicated that she was genuinely sorry, or if I had just touched a guilty nerve. I didn't feel any better or know any more than I used to, and I just felt sick. Did I build a case on a set of circumstances that actually had no connection? To be honest, I couldn't accept it. Should I confront her now? If she was having an affair, what's the use of confrontation? In the end, I decided to just wait until Tuesday. Asterisk, 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 connecting the dots, asterisk, 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 asterisk. I booked a room and then did my best to get through one of the worst weekends of my life. I kept telling myself that I didn't have anything concrete and that my assumptions might be wrong. It didn't help, and I just felt miserable. The situation was aggravated by the fact that the children quickly noticed that something was wrong with their dad and wanted to know what exactly. Of course, I couldn't give them a satisfactory answer. The situation was made worse by the fact that Cindy knew what the problem was and kept trying to assure me that she loved me and told me how sorry she was that she didn't understand my opinion about our agreement at the time. The only relief I felt was that during several of these attempts to rectify the situation, I thought to myself, if my suspicions are correct, maybe she'll see how much I was hurt by Larry's case, which will make her reconsider her thoughts and cancel the date with him. Of course, if my suspicions were unfounded, I would have gone through a lot of grief and torment over a trifle. Unfortunately, the terrible suspicions persisted. Monday was hell. In the afternoon, I took the rented surveillance equipment to the hotel, checked in, and then installed the equipment. Dinner was worse than usual. Cindy got the kids out of the way as soon as possible, and then attacked me with all her might, trying to convince me how sorry she was for what she had done, and to assure me of her love and desire to put me to bed and show me. She brought it to such an extent that I almost came face to face with her. Shortly before I did, she changed her tactics. Standing with his hands on his hips and showing signs of irritation, he said, "Damn it, Ron. This is beyond the bounds of reason. You attach great importance to a misunderstanding, the consequences of which are not worth discussing. I made a mistake and made love to someone else. My main mistake was that I did this to someone you knew, and you have no idea how sorry I am for this misconduct. Yes, it was my stupid fault. But how long do I have to apologize for one stupid mistake? I hope our marriage is strong enough to withstand the small mistakes that each of us can make." With these words, she couldn't stand it and muttered in a weak voice, "I'm saying this for the last time. I am so sorry. I'm going to bed now. I wanted to go to her, but I couldn't. In the morning, I was able to put on a fake appearance and look a little better than I have in the last few days. Before I left, I decided to try one last thing to see if I could find some relief. When I was putting on my coat to leave, I said, 'Honey, I don't think there will be too many things in the office, so as soon as I can clear my desk, I'll come home and we can go have lunch and talk.' She turned pale and I think her legs almost gave out. 'Oh, honey, I have an appointment at the dentist this morning. You know how it is, there's no telling how long I'll be there. Could you come home early today? You didn't mention the orthodontist appointment earlier. Honey, after everything that's been going on in the last few days, Dr. Schmidt was the last thing on my mind. I usually call and cancel an appointment, but my jaw hurts and I need an adjustment. Can't we meet this afternoon?' 'No, I'm sorry, but I have an appointment shortly after lunch. I do not know how long this will last.' At that moment, I couldn't hide my feelings anymore, and I know she saw it, but she looked away and said, 'I'm sorry, honey. Maybe after the kids go upstairs.' I didn't say anything, kissed her on the cheek and left. Going to work was a joke. I did absolutely nothing that mattered. I was thinking about going to the hotel and meeting them face to face. I decided not to do this because I knew that if I caught them in a rage, I could kill one or both of them. I called at lunchtime and was a little surprised when she answered. I noticed that she looked a little annoyed about something. Knowing that I was busy, why didn't she spend more time with that bastard? Then it dawned on me that it was 11 o'clock. I told her I'd be late and wouldn't wait for dinner. Around noon, I checked into the hotel and into the room. Fortunately, it was invented. I'm sure I'd feel physically sick if the remnants of my morning classes were still there. When I was filming the cameras, there was a knock on the door. Looking through the peephole, I saw Alan. I opened the door and let him in. "Hi, Alan. Thank you for helping." "Welcome. I'm sorry about all this. I haven't seen her before, but today I saw Cindy come in." "Thanks for the information. With what I believe I have, the two of us are finished. I thought you'd be interested to know that Larry was very angry with me this morning." "How is that?" "Well, shortly after your wife came in, he called the reception desk and wanted to extend his stay for another day. My clerk relayed the request to me when Larry started insulting the staff. He was angry because he needed to change rooms. I told him that this room had been specifically requested and that we couldn't change it. In the end, he agreed to another room. When I told him that I would send a messenger to help him move, he immediately told me that he would not. He could have handled it on his own. I asked if he saw them leave, and he told me that Cindy left around 4. Larry left too, but he didn't know when. It was after Cindy. I was puzzled. How did Cindy drive back and forth so fast? It didn't take a ton of bricks to fall. She used call forwarding. There would be no record of the day's activities, but so what? I didn't need it. When I finished removing the equipment, I was torn from watching the video. I told Cindy I wouldn't be home for dinner, planning to watch the video. Now I wasn't sure if I wanted to see them right now. I needed to think about what I was going to do at that moment. If the records showed what I thought, now I really knew, I needed to find a lawyer. There were no circumstances that could justify her and allow me to take her back. If the recordings didn't show anything, then it would be a fat laugh. Then I needed to clarify some things and get us back on the right course. But I just couldn't bring myself to look at them right now. I called Cindy and told her that everything was canceled and that I would be home for dinner. Maybe I can find something with her. On the way home, something from the past came to my mind. On the Monday after the reunion, Cindy gave up and went for a checkup. That evening, she told me that the tests were negative. Wait a damn minute. They usually don't get the results on the same day. I never saw the certificate. I only had her word. I called the doctor's office and found out that she had not been to the doctor at all. Her last visit was for an annual medical checkup about 8 months ago. Fortunately, when I got home, I found that the children had gone to spend the night with friends. Tomorrow was Teacher's Day and there was no school. I decided to take my time. How was your day? Everything was fine. Nothing special except that we don't have children today. We talked about something in general while we were having dinner on the table. While we were eating, she finally looked at me and asked if I was coping with my problem. No, I can't say that it is. You don't do much to help the cause. She looked up in shock and asked what I meant. Why did you lie to me? With annoyance. What the hell are you talking about now? When we returned from the reunion, a meeting of classmates or veterans, etc., why did you lie to me about being tested for STDs? In a more irritated and muttering voice, what are you talking about? Her quick switch to irritation told me that I was rubbing exposed nerves that were very close to the surface and had recently been exposed. Okay, Cindy, let's get this shit over with. I talked to the doctor today and you haven't been there for 8 months. In other words, you're lying to me. Damn you. I'm not going to put up with your childish jealousy of Larry anymore. Yes, I was wrong. I admitted it. But you keep bullying me. Your fucking order for me to be examined was completely unnecessary and stupid, and there was no reason for it. It was just your childish way of punishing me and taking out your anger on Larry. I'm sorry I lied to you, but you left me no choice. Now if you can't handle this Larry thing, you need to see a psychologist. She started to leave, loudly. Wait a minute, lady. Either you sit down and talk to me, or we need to think about ending this marriage. My remark was heard and she sat down. I have a big question. Why did you refuse to get tested and then lie about it? I think the answer lies in answering a more important and serious question. Whose word will you believe, Larry's or mine? At first glance, it seems that the answer should be for Larry. And why Larry? She jumped up and screamed, Here it is, your uncontrollable jealousy of him. He's not who you and your friends are trying to make him out to be. He was always kind to me. Has he always been kind to you? What does always mean? A little haltingly, he said, You know what I mean. When I was with him at the meeting, he was very nice. Well, I'm not going to argue with you. It's time to put up with it or shut up. Our lovemaking ends until you get tested. The way he acted behind my back at the meeting tells me that he is still a bag of slime that was thrown out of the Corps for harassment. I wonder how many times he has been treated since then, and even more surprised how he avoided AIDS all this time. Trust me, Cindy, what I'm saying has nothing to do with jealousy. It has to do with the health and well-being of my family. If it doesn't mean anything to you, then it's really time to think about going different ways. She was sitting and looking at me, and tears were running down her cheeks. I could see that she was distraught. Finally, in something just above a whisper, I'm sorry, dear, I believe your motives, but I still believe you're wrong about Larry. I'll go to the doctor tomorrow. She came over, kissed me on the cheek, and went into the bedroom. Over my shoulder. Are you coming? Not now. I brought home some work that I need to look at. I sat for a minute. I just decided that I can't put off watching the video. Taking my briefcase, I went into the office, closed the door, took out the video recordings, put on my headset, and began what I feared was going to be a painful exercise. I wasn't afraid that Cindy would come in to me. There is a built-in warning system in the hallway, formed by several creaking boards. If you don't approach the office by jumping about 6 feet, you won't be able to avoid them. Around midnight, I remembered something. I took out my cell phone and dialed our home phone. As I suspected, she forgot to turn off the redirection. I could hear her cell phone ringing in the kitchen. Instead of hanging up, I just let it ring. Moments later, I heard footsteps in the hall and down the stairs when Cindy quietly exclaimed, "Oh, shit." She said hello several times and hung up the phone. I got up quickly, went to the door, and when she came up the stairs, I asked, "Is everything okay?" Yes, some idiot called me on my mobile phone at this hour and did not answer. Probably drunk. It's okay, honey. Are you coming soon? After a while, If it wasn't for the audio, I wouldn't have watched all the recordings. I cried a lot and wanted to kill someone. In the video, she made love in every possible way. At the end of the recording, the conversation with Alan was recorded, and Larry gave Cindy the room number and told her to follow him in about 5 minutes. In the rest of the recording, housekeepers and an empty room were visible. It was almost 3 before I finished, and I didn't even try to go to bed. I went to the den, watched TV, and must have dozed off around 5. The next thing I knew, I heard the alarm go off, and moments later Cindy was there, asking why I hadn't come to bed. I told him the truth. I'm sick. She tried to put me to bed, but I told her I had to go to work. I needed to talk to someone, so I called Jerry and bent his ear. She called me shortly after 8 and said she had an appointment with a doctor at 10. By then, I didn't care if she was checked out. Around 11:30, she appeared in my office. She was smiling and bouncing when she came in. Here, I got this stupid old test out of the way. They are speeding up the work and will have results late tomorrow evening. I told them you'd get the results tomorrow. Will it make you happier now, and will you take me to lunch with you? I just nodded and took her to eat. It was hard for me to control myself while we were eating. It was painful to realize that our marriage was over. When she burst into my office, I barely had time to come, as I had just returned from the law office to begin the divorce process. The actual paperwork would take a few days, and I didn't want to wait. No, I couldn't wait that long before telling her what was going to happen. The lawyer suggested that I give her a letter of intent to officially inform her of what was going to happen. It will be ready tomorrow. Looking at her now, it just hurt. After a terrible night of torment, I moved like a robot at work. The lawyer's secretary called me before lunch and told me that the letter was ready. Since it was close, I went and got it. I almost didn't want to take the envelope, and I cried on the way to the office. The results of the laboratory tests were ready by 3 o'clock. I quit my job as soon as I heard about it. I was shocked when I asked for Cindy's test results, and the nurse told me that the doctor would be out in a minute to explain the results. I was even more shocked when he came out and escorted me to his office. After a moment of pleasantries, he asked me his first question. "Mr. Allred, when was the last time you made love to your wife?" I won't repeat the whole conversation, but Cindy tested positive for HIV. I fainted and was in a swoon for almost an hour. During our next conversation, I told him what was going on, and we determined that her infection was relatively new, definitely not old enough to go back to her last meeting with Larry. I felt some relief being sure that she hadn't infected me. However, I did the test. When I finished, I had to call a friend from work to come pick me up. I was in no condition to drive a car. He wanted to take me home, and I insisted on going back to my office. I sat quietly, thinking about the situation and crying from time to time. When I was leaving, my friend drove me back to get my car. I was in a mess with everything from deep despair, sadness, rage. Instead of going home, I went to a local bar. I wasn't going to get drunk, and I didn't. I just needed more time for myself. Around 6 o'clock, my cell phone rang. It was Cindy, and I know she wanted to know where I was. At that moment, she could go to hell for everything I cared about. I turned off the phone and continued the usual conversation between the offended husband and the bartender. It didn't help, but it allowed me to gain some control over myself. About 11 o'clock, I headed for the house. It was a house now, not a house. Earlier in the evening, I called my relatives and asked them to take care of the children a little bit. Tomorrow I will bring them and tell them about the business when I arrive. She heard the garage door open and entered the garage screaming and sobbing, asking where I was and how worried she was. She tried to grab me and kiss me, but I just pushed her aside. I told her to stop crying and meet me in the break room, basement. I'll be there in a minute. I followed her and closed the doors so as not to wake the children. Then I went to the break room, closing the door as I went. Ron, what happened? What's happening? You're scaring me." I didn't trust my voice. I just pulled out the lab report and threw it on the table in front of her. She looked at him, and then I saw how panic and fear took over. Trembling, she reached out to him. It took her a moment to realize what she was looking at, and then she screamed in a muffled voice, "Ron, this must be a mistake. The lab got something mixed up." She started to continue when I furiously inserted, "I told you what could happen if you mess with that bag of slime. He's dirty again, and now you are too." This made her say briefly and in a slightly deflated voice, "What are you talking about?" I couldn't contain my rage anymore. "Let me explain this to you. That bastard infected you with AIDS. But Ron, I didn't see it. Don't make it worse than you are, you lying fool. Stop lying to me. Let me ask you, how dare you confess your love for me, and at the same time not worry that I might get infected too? I don't want to hear the word love coming out of your mouth again when you're next to me, and it won't be for long. He almost screams, Ron, you're wrong, I'm not. I've done something I've never done before in my life. I slapped her in the face. I slapped her so hard that she staggered back and plopped down on the couch. Over her scream, I shouted, shut your damn mouth, as I spoke and loaded one of the tapes into the player. I brought home a great movie that you should watch. I didn't know how much she could see, and I didn't care. I think her continued lying made it easier for me to do what I had to do. You will receive the divorce papers in the next few days, and I threw her a letter of intent. As soon as you can pull yourself together, go upstairs, pack what you need for the night, and then send your pathetic ass to the hotel. I'm taking the children to my relatives in the morning, and I'll be back on Sunday afternoon. By the time I get back, you'd better pack up what you need at the moment and find some sort of accommodation. There is money in the checking account, but it will not give much. I have canceled your cards and will take back the copy of my card that you have before you leave. Oh, Ron, kids, I can't leave without saying goodbye to them. And where should I go? You won't see the children. I just hope they didn't get infected. This caused her to howl. I do not know if it was because she could not see them or because she was afraid at the thought of infecting them. Cindy, at the moment, I do not know where you can go, and I definitely don't care. On the screen, she was riding him in a cowboy pose, pointing at the screen. It's a beautiful picture, isn't it? I'm looking forward to others seeing it. Now get your slutty ass off the couch, pack your stuff, and get out of here. You can come back after 8 in the morning, and you better not be here when I get back Sunday night. If that's the case, I'll physically kick your ass out. Oh, to clarify the situation, I know that he was in town, and you were with him at least 2 and most likely 3 times before Tuesday. He will not recover so well this time and is expected to be hospitalized for several weeks. Sit here and cry all you want, but if you don't leave in an hour, I'll help you. I turned my back on her screams and pleas and went upstairs. I've never talked to anyone the way I just talked to her, not even my fake apps in the outfit. I almost wanted to go back and apologize. Inflating the wheel as I had just done, I installed a safety valve, and by the time I got to the kitchen, my stomach had almost stopped hurting. The disgust and rage were still present, but the cramps were quickly disappearing. I heard the garage door open and close about 45 minutes later. For your information, I tested the children, and all 3 of us had negative results. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. 11 years plus asterisk, 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 asterisk. Larry spent the last weeks of his life in pain and in the hospital. The night before he was supposed to be sent to a rehabilitation center, a visitor came to him. He immediately smiled and said, God, it's good to see you. It's a pretty secluded place. Without saying a word, the visitor walked up to the bed and heard the sound of metal on metal and ringing. Then he shouted his last words, No, no. The visitor took another step, put a .45 caliber pistol to his head and pulled the trigger. The first bullet hit was accurate, and there was no need to waste the second. Cindy appeared in court, and thanks to my buddies who provided her background and character witness, as well as described Larry's character, she was able to get a conviction for second-degree manslaughter instead of the first-degree charges brought against her. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 10. Very soon, she would have been eligible to participate in the parole competition. For the last 2 years in prison, she was hospitalized as AIDS gradually took over. One of the painful questions that I have not received an answer to sounds like this. How did she get to the hospital, and then how did she find out how to use it? She was mortally afraid of guns. Of course, none of my friends had any idea how she did it. I met and married Marlene 5 years ago. I can't tell you what a light she was for my life and my children. I also have to say thank you to Cindy. Cindy, you ask? Yes, Marlene stepped into the void created by the loss of her wife and mother. She knew the story of what happened, and about a year after we got married, she convinced me that Cindy had really pulled the short straw. She didn't try to justify or defend Cindy, but insisted that she deserved better than what she got in the end. Afterwards, we visited her in prison every couple of months. On the first trips, Cindy tried to make amends and apologize for everything. With Marlene's help, we were able to put an end to the mutual accusations. We all became friends and we had some great meetings. In these meetings, Cindy was able to help me overcome the terrible feelings and subsequent nightmares that I suffered from. She set out to make the world right for all of us. The only thing that bothered her was that she refused to see the children. I want them to remember me as the mother I was. During our visit about a year ago, when Cindy really began to suffer from the effects of a terrible illness, she confessed, "I have only one regret about the night I shot Larry. It's a pity that I didn't point the gun at myself. The last time I saw her was about a month ago. She was fading fast and she knew it. She thanked us for our love and support. Her last words to us made us both leave the prison in tears. You two give our children all my love and take care of them. I love you all, and please convey my thanks to all your Marine friends. They came to my defense when I needed them. I wish I had listened to them from the beginning. I think it's more accurate to say, Semper Fi, buddy." Author's note. Ron informed me that a few months ago, Marlene regularly visited Cindy once or twice a week for several weeks. Ron didn't know about the nature of these meetings until Marlene told him about it after Cindy's death. At the meetings, Cindy told Marlene her story. Cindy couldn't write, so she let Marlene record her story on tape. Marlene promised Cindy not to tell about this story or use it in any way before her death. Ron approved the issue, and Marlene will be happy to write it from Cindy's point of view if there are enough readers indicating that they will like it.